There's a specific phone call that happens in millions of American homes every year. It's from one of your adult children. They're in their late 20s, maybe 30s, maybe older, and they need money. Not a lot, usually. A few thousand here, a rent payment there, help with a car repair, a down payment on something, a bill they can't cover this month. You say yes. Of course you say yes. You love them. You have the money, or close enough. And saying no feels, in that moment, like a betrayal of everything a parent is supposed to be. Let me show you the blueprint. Because the quiet financial crisis destroying more American retirements right now, more than market crashes, more than medical bills, more than bad investments, is well-intentioned parents in their 40s, 50s, and 60s slowly draining their own futures to subsidize adult children who in many cases are being hurt by the help that looks like love, the help nobody ever told you could be the most damaging thing you do. Let me start with the numbers. Because the scale of what's happening is so much larger than most Americans realize. According to recent research, nearly half of American parents with adult children between the ages of 18 and 35 are currently providing some form of financial support to those children. Nearly half. Not a small minority. Not exceptional cases. Half. And the average amount being transferred per child per year is somewhere between $1,000 and $10,000. Some families send considerably more. Some parents are essentially funding a second household on top of their own. The total annual transfer from American parents to adult children is estimated at around $500 billion per year. $500 billion. That's more than the entire American defense budget, more than the combined retirement savings of many middle-income retirees. A quiet economic river flowing from the generation that saved to the generation that is increasingly unable to. And here's what makes this staggering. Most parents providing this support are themselves behind on their own retirement savings. They're already not where they should be. They're pulling money from accounts that are already undersized to help adult children who, in a fair proportion of cases, are not experiencing genuine emergencies, but are simply living at a lifestyle level higher than their income supports. Let me tell you exactly what this does to the parent. A mother in her late 50s sending her 31-year-old son $600 a month to help with his rent because he moved to a city where his income doesn't cover the lifestyle he wants. Over 10 years, that's $72,000. $72,000 that should have been compounding in her retirement account. At average market returns over the same decade, that money would have grown to approximately $104,000. And over the following 20 years of retirement, it would have compounded further to somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000. $300,000 out of a single mother's retirement, sent to her son $600 at a time over 10 years. Because saying no felt wrong. And here's the painful part. Her son is still renting that same apartment. He hasn't changed his lifestyle. He hasn't saved any money. He hasn't built any financial resilience. Because why would he? The pressure to figure it out, the discomfort that would have forced growth, has been quietly absorbed by his mother's retirement account. She paid for him to not develop. This is where most people get it wrong. They confuse the immediate relief of solving a child's problem with the long-term work of raising a capable adult. These are two different things. Sometimes they align, often they don't. Let me give you the crucial distinction. There's a difference between helping an adult child through a genuine crisis, a medical emergency, an unexpected job loss, a real accident, and funding a lifestyle that exceeds what they've earned. The first is love. The second is something else, even when it feels like love. The second is parents buying their children's short-term comfort at the cost of the children's long-term capability. And capability is the thing that actually matters. Capability is what allows an adult to weather their own storms, make their own decisions, build their own life, and eventually, critically, take care of their own parents if the parents need it in old age. Capability cannot be gifted. Capability can only be developed, and it develops almost always through the discomfort of figuring things out without rescue. When we rescue adult children from the discomfort of their own mistakes and inadequate planning, we are, with the best of intentions, preventing the exact developmental process that would eventually turn them into competent adults. We're loving them in ways that stunt them. We're protecting them from the very experiences that would let them grow past needing us. I want to be careful here. I'm not saying never help. I'm saying help deliberately. Help specifically. Help in ways that build capability rather than replace it. Because the difference between helpful help and harmful help is not the amount of money. It's not even the frequency. It's the structure of the help itself. And that structure is something almost no American parent has been taught to think about. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. And the plan for helping adult children has to start with a question almost no parent asks themselves honestly. What is this help actually doing? Is it building my child's capacity to handle their own life? Or is it subsidizing their inability to do so? Because those two things require completely different responses. And treating one like the other is the source of almost every financial disaster I've watched unfold between American parents and their adult children. But to really understand the mechanics of this, you need to see the specific patterns by which good parents with good intentions end up causing real damage. Because the patterns are almost always the same, and recognizing them is the first step toward breaking out of them. There are 5 specific patterns I've watched destroy American families across generations. 5 ways that well-meaning parental help slowly becomes structural damage. Let me name them clearly, because naming them is the first step toward recognizing them in your own life. Pattern 1 is the recurring transfer. This is when parents send regular monthly or periodic amounts to an adult child. $200 for the phone bill, $500 for rent assistance, $1,000 for a car payment. The amount is usually modest enough that it doesn't feel like a crisis-level intervention. It feels like help, maintenance, a little cushion. Here's what the recurring transfer actually does. It quietly removes the natural pressure that adult life places on an adult. Adult life is designed, in some ways, to teach through discomfort. When you can't afford a bill, that's the market telling you your lifestyle is out of alignment with your income. The correct response is to adjust, move somewhere cheaper, find a better job, cut lifestyle costs, make the difficult changes that adults have to make. But when a parent quietly absorbs the gap each month, the adjustment never happens. The misalignment stays. For years, sometimes decades, an adult child remains in a lifestyle their actual income cannot support, and the only thing keeping it intact is mom or dad's quiet monthly transfer. The tragedy is that the recurring transfer almost never stops voluntarily, because stopping would require the adult child to experience all at once the full weight of a lifestyle they've never had to support alone. The pressure that was avoided for years arrives all at once, and by then, the adult child is usually in their late 30s or 40s, without the savings, skills, or resilience to absorb it. The kindest thing a parent could have done 20 years earlier was to let the child feel the initial pressure and adjust then. The hardest thing is to stop the transfer now, when the child has built an entire life around it. Pattern 2 is the emergency rescue that wasn't really an emergency. An adult child calls in crisis. They need $2,000 for something that feels urgent, a car that broke down, a medical bill, a deposit for a new apartment because they have to move by the weekend. The emotional pressure to help in these moments is enormous, and the parent usually helps. Of course they help. But here's the pattern. Over time, these emergencies start to repeat. Every 6 months, every 3 months, every few weeks eventually. And what becomes clear, if the parent steps back and looks, is that these aren't really emergencies in the meaningful sense. They're the predictable consequences of an adult child not building any financial buffer. Without savings, ordinary life events become crises. A tire needs replacing. That's a crisis. A car registration is due. That's a crisis. An ordinary expected expense arrives without any margin to absorb it. And suddenly, it's an emergency requiring parental rescue. The loving response to repeated crises is not more rescue. It's helping the adult child build the capacity to handle ordinary events themselves, which means, sometimes, letting a small crisis unfold, letting the tire replacement come out of a credit card if it has to, letting the difficulty land where it naturally lands, because the absence of rescue is the only thing that forces the building of the savings cushion that would prevent future crises. Pattern 3 is the down payment problem. Parents help an adult child buy a home. The gift is enormous. $20,000, $40,000, sometimes more. It feels like the most generous and useful thing a parent can do. They're helping their child enter the housing market, giving them a leg up, setting them up for life. Sometimes it works. But there's a pattern I've watched with alarming frequency. The down payment makes the mortgage affordable at today's lifestyle, but the adult child hasn't actually built the financial habits or savings that would let them handle the ongoing costs of home ownership. When the roof leaks, they panic. When property taxes go up, they panic. When a major appliance dies, they panic. And who gets the call every time? The parents who helped with the down payment, who now effectively own a house they don't live in. Through the slow drip of repairs and emergencies, they keep absorbing. Pattern 4 is the business rescue. An adult child wants to start a business. They need capital. The parent lends, or more commonly gives, a significant amount. The business struggles, as most startups do. More capital is needed. The parent gives again and again. Years pass. The business either fails slowly or consumes massive amounts of parental wealth to stay alive. In the meantime, the adult child hasn't built the hard-won capabilities that entrepreneurs typically develop through the brutal necessity of bootstrapping. They've learned to run a business that only functions because of parental subsidy. Pattern 5 is the grandchild funding. Grandparents, wanting to be generous, pay for extracurricular activities, private school, summer camps, college savings, clothing, birthday parties. The amounts feel like love, and they are love. But the pattern often becomes parents relying on grandparents to fund a lifestyle for their own children that their own income cannot support. Which means the grandparents are quietly subsidizing not just their adult children, but their adult children's parenting choices. If you fix this, everything changes. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. And the plan requires something that feels almost impossible in the moment, but becomes clear when you pull back and look at the larger picture. The plan requires the emotional discipline to distinguish between love and rescue. Because they look the same from the inside, but they produce completely different results over decades. One builds adults, the other prevents their development. Let me share something that'll be uncomfortable to hear, but it's essential to say. One of the most loving things you can do for your adult children is to be a financially secure older parent. And one of the most damaging things you can do for them, long term, is to quietly drain your own retirement to keep them comfortable today. Let me explain what I mean by walking through what happens in families that get this backwards. When a parent depletes their retirement savings to help adult children in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, the money transfer feels, in the short term, like the parent is sacrificing their own comfort for the child's well-being. It feels like love. It feels like what a good parent does. But here's what actually happens over time. The parents reach their late 60s or 70s. Their own savings are insufficient. They can't retire comfortably. Their income drops. Their medical expenses rise. And somewhere around age 75-80, the parent needs help, not small help, real help, the kind of help that costs $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 a year, long-term care, medical expenses, assisted living, all the realities we covered in the Medicare video earlier in this series. And who does the bill land on? The adult children. The same adult children who receive transfers for 20 or 30 years. Except now they're in their 40s and 50s, with their own families, their own financial challenges, and often without the capacity to absorb the massive costs of aging parents who didn't save enough because they spent decades supporting the same children who now have to support them. Let that sink in for a moment, because it's one of the quietest and most tragic patterns in American middle-class life. Parents spend their peak earning years subsidizing their children's lifestyles. Children never develop the full financial capability that would have come from supporting themselves. Parents reach old age with insufficient savings. Children now have to absorb the cost of the parents' old age, a cost that, because the children never developed strong financial habits, is crushing to them. The family transfers wealth downward for decades, then upward for decades, and at the end, no one has built any durable wealth. The alternative is harder to do in the moment, but works dramatically better over time. When parents hold the line on their own retirement savings, when they help adult children strategically rather than continuously, the structure produces different outcomes. Adult children learn to support themselves, maybe uncomfortably at first, but eventually competently. Parents arrive at old age with real financial security. When aging needs arrive, those needs can be funded from the parents' own savings. The adult children are not crushed. The family remains intact financially across generations. The most loving thing you can do, long term, is often the thing that feels least loving in the short term. Let your adult child struggle a bit with an ordinary expense. Let them figure out how to handle a financial setback on their own. Let them experience the slow-building discomfort that pushes someone to develop financial capability. And meanwhile, keep your own retirement fully funded so that 20 years from now, you're not a financial burden on the very children you were trying to protect. This is where the language matters. We've been taught to think of helping adult children as generous and of holding back as selfish. Those labels are backwards. Helping adult children in ways that stunt their growth is actually a form of borrowed generosity. You're borrowing emotional comfort today against their future capability and your own retirement security. Holding back, structuring help carefully, letting natural consequences teach. These are the forms of generosity that actually accumulate over decades into a family that functions well across generations. There's a related truth that's even harder to name. Sometimes adult children struggle because they're making choices that aren't working. Living in expensive cities they can't afford, pursuing careers that don't generate enough income, prioritizing lifestyle over savings, buying things beyond their means. When parents subsidize these choices, they're not just draining themselves, they're removing the market feedback that would eventually push the adult child toward better decisions. The adult child never feels the full weight of their choices because a parent is absorbing it. Without that weight, the choices continue for years, sometimes decades. This is where most people get it wrong. They think supportive parenting means removing all discomfort. It doesn't. Supportive parenting, once children are adults, means allowing discomfort to do its developmental work while being present for genuine emergencies. The two things look similar from the outside. The inside is completely different. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. And the plan requires a specific mental shift that almost no American parent has made consciously. You have to decide, as a parent, that your adult child's long-term capability matters more than their short-term comfort. Once you make that decision, the specific choices become clearer, which help to offer, which to decline, which emergencies to absorb, which to let unfold. The decisions get easier because they're anchored to a principle that serves the actual future, not just the immediate moment. Let me give you a framework for thinking about when to help and when to hold back. Because the question isn't whether to help your adult children. Of course you help. The question is how and under what structure and toward what outcome. I call this framework the 3 filters. Every request for help from an adult child should pass through these 3 questions before you decide how to respond. Not as a cold calculation, but as a conscious pause between the emotional pull to rescue and the actual decision you make. Filter 1. Is this a genuine emergency or the predictable consequence of a pattern? A genuine emergency is an unexpected event outside the adult child's control. A car accident, a sudden medical condition, a job loss they didn't cause, a natural disaster. These are real emergencies, and loving parents help during them. Absolutely, without hesitation, within reason. A predictable consequence is different. It's what happens when the adult child's ordinary lifestyle produces recurring crises because there's no financial buffer. The tire replacement that keeps becoming an emergency because there's no savings account. The rent that keeps being short because the apartment was always too expensive for the income. The credit card debt that keeps spiraling because spending habits haven't changed. These aren't emergencies in the meaningful sense. They're predictable outcomes of patterns that will keep repeating until something changes. And parental rescue is the single biggest reason they keep repeating. The honest answer to filter 1, in many cases, is that what feels like an emergency is actually the 5th or 10th or 20th iteration of the same predictable pattern. And responding to it as an emergency just guarantees there will be a 21st. Filter 2. Will this help build capability or replace it? Building capability means the adult child ends up more capable of handling similar situations independently in the future. This might mean helping them set up a proper budget for the first time, helping them find a cheaper apartment and co-signing while they build credit, paying for a skills course that leads to higher income, covering an unexpected medical bill while they build an emergency fund afterward. Help that teaches, enables, and creates future independence. Replacing capability means the adult child ends up exactly as capable as they were before, except now they've learned that parental rescue is available. This looks like cash transfers for ordinary monthly expenses, recurring rent assistance for apartments they can't afford, funding lifestyle costs that exceed income, help that removes the pressure to adjust without ever teaching the skill to adjust. The same dollar amount, given in different ways, can either build or replace capability, and the difference over 10 or 20 years is the difference between a 35-year-old who can handle their own life and one who can't. Filter 3. Can I afford this without damaging my own retirement? This is the filter most parents refuse to apply honestly because applying it feels selfish. It isn't. It's the filter that protects both generations from a much worse future. You need to have an honest conversation with yourself, maybe with a financial advisor, about whether you're on track for retirement. If the answer is that you're behind or struggling to catch up, then giving money to adult children is not just a transfer from you to them. It's a transfer from your future retirement security to their current lifestyle, which means 20 years from now, the bill is going to come back to them anyway, except multiplied by the cost of aging care, medical expenses, and everything else you'll need. The honest truth is that parents who are behind on retirement savings should, in almost all cases, prioritize their own savings before helping adult children beyond genuine emergencies. This isn't selfish. It's the single most important gift you can give your adult children long term. It means you won't need them to support you in old age. It means they can build their own lives without the looming prospect of absorbing your medical and care costs in 15 or 20 years. Parents who are comfortably on track for retirement have more flexibility. If your retirement is secure, helping adult children with specific structured capability-building assistance can be a wonderful use of your resources. But even for financially secure parents, the how matters as much as the amount. This is where most people get it wrong. They make helping decisions based on emotional pull rather than structural reasoning. They help when their child seems stressed. They help when saying no feels hard. They help based on how painful the refusal would be in the moment. None of those criteria match what actually produces the best outcomes. If you fix this, everything changes. You don't need more money, you need a better plan. Now, applying these filters in real life is harder than understanding them. Because the requests from adult children don't come in neat packages with labels. They come in phone calls, texts, awkward dinner conversations. And saying anything other than an immediate yes requires a kind of composure under emotional pressure that most parents have never practiced. That composure and the specific language you need in those moments is what comes next. The hard part is not the framework. The hard part is the conversation. Because when the phone rings, when your adult child calls with a problem, when the emotional pressure is real and present, and you can hear the stress in their voice, the rational framework you intellectually agreed with 5 minutes ago tends to evaporate. You just want to help. You want to make it better. You want to be the parent they need. And saying anything other than an immediate yes feels, in that moment, like the worst thing a parent can do. Let me give you specific language for these moments. Not because specific words are magical, but because having pre-thought phrases ready reduces the emotional load in the moment and allows you to respond from your plan rather than from panic. The first phrase is one of the most powerful in the parental vocabulary. Let me think about it and get back to you tomorrow. That's it. That's the whole sentence. You don't have to decide on the phone. You don't have to decide today. You are allowed to take time. And in that time between the request and your response, the acute emotional pressure fades and your actual judgment returns. Almost every parent who makes a harmful helping decision makes it in the first 10 minutes of the phone call. Delaying the decision by 24 hours is often the difference between a helpful response and a damaging one. The second phrase is for conversations where you've decided not to give cash directly but want to remain genuinely helpful. I'm not going to send you money, but I want to help you figure this out. Let's talk through what your options are. Notice what this does. It refuses the specific form of help that would replace capability. It offers a different form of help, engaged problem solving, that builds capability. It keeps you in the relationship as an engaged parent, just not as a rescue vehicle. And it signals, quietly and firmly, that your adult child has options they haven't yet thought through. The third phrase is for situations where some help is warranted, but not the help being requested. I can help with this, but here's what that would look like. Then you propose a structured form of help that is different from what they asked for. Maybe they asked for $3,000 for rent. You offer instead to help them find a cheaper apartment and to co-sign on it. Maybe they asked for help with credit card debt. You offer instead to help them meet with a credit counselor and build a repayment plan while not covering the debt itself. You're saying yes to their situation and no to the specific transaction, which is almost always the right combination. The fourth phrase addresses the recurring transfer. I've been thinking about this, and I need to stop the monthly support. Not because I don't love you, but because I've realized it's not helping you build what you need. Let's talk about how to transition. This conversation is painful. It will not go smoothly the first time. Your adult child may react with hurt, anger, or even accusation. That reaction is part of why the pattern has continued, because ending it is emotionally costly for the parent, but the conversation is essential, and the sooner you have it, the easier the transition will be for everyone. A 30-year-old adjusting to the end of monthly support is a much easier situation than a 50-year-old doing the same. The fifth phrase, and maybe the most important, is for moments of genuine crisis. This is a real emergency. I'm going to help, and once we get through it, we're going to talk about how to build the structure that prevents the next one. This separates the immediate response from the follow-up work. You help in the moment, and then you do the harder work afterward. The conversation about savings, budgeting, lifestyle adjustments, whatever specific building blocks are missing. The emergency help plus the follow-up conversation is what turns a crisis into a developmental moment. Help without the follow-up is just another iteration of the same pattern. Here's what I want you to really hear. None of these conversations are easy. All of them involve sitting with your adult child's discomfort rather than immediately relieving it. All of them require you to tolerate the short-term strain in your relationship in exchange for long-term benefit to both of you. And all of them require a kind of parental composure that almost no American parent has been trained for. But here's the beautiful thing. Once you have a few of these conversations, they become easier, and the adult children you have them with, in almost every case I've watched, end up more capable, more independent, more financially stable, and more grateful than the ones who received unlimited subsidy. Because somewhere inside, most adult children know when they're being supported versus when they're being enabled. They might not say it, they might not even consciously feel it, but the self-respect that comes from handling their own life is something they can't fake and can't borrow from their parents. If you fix this, everything changes. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. And the plan, emotionally, is not to become cold or distant or withholding. It's to become the kind of parent who loves with both heart and long-term wisdom, who gives generously when giving helps, and holds back generously when holding back helps more, who is present for genuine crises and absent from manufactured ones, who teaches through both what they offer and what they don't. That's the plan. And it's the plan that raises adults who will be capable long after you're gone. Before I close this out with the final piece that ties everything together, I want to pause for a moment. If you've made it this far into the video with me, if you've sat through uncomfortable truths about parenting adult children without clicking away, if you're still here and still willing to examine your own helping patterns honestly, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and walk with us every single day. This is the kind of conversation we have here. Not comfortable, not politically correct, not sentimental. Just honest, grounded, generationally aware discussion of how money actually flows between the people you love, and what that flow does over decades into the shape of a family. And I want to say something directly. This is possibly the hardest topic we've covered in this entire series, because it challenges the script most American parents have internalized, the idea that more help always means more love, that generous parents give, that withholding is cruel, that your job as a parent is to remove your child's discomfort whenever you can. That script is not ancient wisdom. It's actually a fairly recent cultural shift, accelerated over the last 40 years by rising costs of living, stagnant middle-class wages, and an entire generation of parents who genuinely wanted their children to have easier lives than they did. The intentions are beautiful. The results too often are catastrophic for both generations. What I've been describing in this video, and the discipline of distinguishing between help and rescue, the 3 filters, the specific language for difficult conversations, this isn't a rejection of love. It's a more mature expression of it. It's love that thinks about 20 years from now as seriously as it thinks about next Tuesday. Love that wants the adult child to be capable, not just comfortable. Love that stays strong enough to sit with temporary discomfort because the long-term outcome is what actually matters. Now let me give you the last piece, the piece that pulls everything together. The most powerful thing you can do for your adult children financially is to model the life you hope they'll build. Let me explain what I mean. For decades, they have watched you, how you handled money, how you handled stress, how you responded to financial crises, how you saved or didn't, how you talked about wealth or didn't, whether you lived within your means or above them, whether your relationship with money seemed peaceful or chaotic, all of that, far more than any advice you could give, shaped the financial person they became. And they're still watching. Even now, in their 30s or 40s or 50s, they're watching how you handle your own money during this phase of life. Are you building toward a secure retirement? Are you making intentional financial decisions? Are you modeling the kind of discipline and long-term thinking you hope they'll adopt? If you drain your savings to subsidize their lifestyle, you're teaching them, indirectly, that financial discipline is optional, that they can count on external support forever, that their generation doesn't need to build the same kind of structural wealth their grandparents did. That's the lesson. Whatever words you use, that's what they actually absorb. If, on the other hand, you protect your own retirement savings, you model something much more valuable. You model that financial security is a serious adult project worth protecting, worth prioritizing, worth declining other good things to preserve. That lesson, taught by example over decades, is worth far more than any cash transfer. And here's the part that often surprises parents. When you hold the line on your own retirement, and you help your adult children in structured, capability-building ways, rather than continuous subsidy ways, something happens in the relationship that's hard to predict from the inside. The adult children often become more respectful, more independent, more grateful, more engaged. Not immediately. There's usually a period of adjustment, maybe even resentment. But over time, the relationship often deepens because it's based on something real rather than on dependency. Because the love flowing between you isn't tangled up with money in the same way. Because there's room for a genuine adult-to-adult relationship to develop, which is almost impossible when one adult is functionally dependent on the other. If you fix this, everything changes. You don't need more money, you need a better plan. And the plan ultimately is not about being a tougher parent or a stingier parent or a colder parent. It's about being a wiser parent. One who loves with both presence and perspective, who sees the long arc of their adult child's life and responds in ways that serve that arc rather than the immediate moment, who protects their own future so they can remain a resource for their family for decades rather than a burden. That kind of parenting is rare. It's difficult. It asks more of you emotionally than the simpler path of just giving when asked. But it produces, over 20 and 30 years, the outcomes that almost every parent actually wants. Capable adult children, secure retirement, family relationships that stay healthy across generations, wealth that accumulates rather than dissipates. There's a scene I want you to carry with you after this video ends. Imagine a Sunday afternoon, 20 years from now. You're in your 70s. Your adult children, now in their 50s, are gathered at your home for a family meal. Grandchildren playing in the yard. Your son is in the kitchen helping with the food. Your daughter, is on the couch laughing with her sister. The conversation is easy. Nobody is stressed about money. Nobody is tense about some old conflict. The afternoon has the quiet, normal quality of a family that simply works. You catch yourself looking around at what you've built. Not the house, not the meal, the people. Adult children who grew into full adults, who built their own lives, who made their own mistakes and recovered from them, who handle their own crises, who may ask your advice from time to time, but don't need your rescue. And somewhere inside you, there's a quiet satisfaction that isn't about pride. It's about having done the work. The long, uncomfortable, patient work of loving your children in ways that let them become fully their own. Your retirement is intact. Your health expenses are handled. You're not a burden to anyone. If anything, you're still a resource, not financially, not primarily, but emotionally, relationally, as a presence that your children and grandchildren benefit from having in their lives. Now picture the alternative scene. Same family, different trajectory. Sunday afternoon, 20 years from now, but the mood is tense. One of your adult children is in their 50s and still financially unstable, still periodically reaching out for help that you can no longer afford to give. Another is quietly resentful because they feel the uneven support that flowed toward their siblings over the years. Your own retirement is strained. Medical costs are starting to mount. Your adult children are trying to figure out between them how to absorb the cost of your aging while also handling their own struggling lives. The family gathering happens, but something sits underneath it. The accumulated weight of decades of financial decisions that didn't serve anyone well over the long run. Both scenes are possible. Both are happening right now in millions of American families. And the only difference between them is whether the parents, in the middle of the story, the 40-somethings, the 50-somethings, the 60-somethings reading the room correctly, made the harder set of decisions during the years when it felt like rescue was love. This is the quiet tragedy of well-intentioned parenting. The path that feels most loving moment to moment often produces the worst outcomes over 30 years. And the path that feels hardest moment to moment often produces the outcome every parent actually wants. I want to name something directly because I think it needs to be said. If you've been helping adult children in ways that, on reflection, fit the patterns I've described in this video, you haven't failed as a parent. You've loved them the way you were taught to love, the way American culture, for the last few decades, has told parents to love. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's only the question of what you do from here. And from here, the work is not to cut them off, not to become a harder parent, not to suddenly become austere or withholding or cold. The work is to begin quietly and deliberately to shift the way you help, to start using the 3 filters, to have the difficult conversations, to let some discomforts unfold naturally, to protect your own retirement with the seriousness it deserves, to model at whatever age you are now the kind of financial adulthood you hope your children and grandchildren will eventually inhabit. That shift does not need to be dramatic. It can happen conversation by conversation, decision by decision, a polite declination here, a structured help there, a difficult conversation once a month. Slowly, over months and years, the pattern changes, and so does the trajectory of your family. Start this week, not someday. This week. Sit down and look honestly at how much money has been flowing to adult children in the last 12 months. Look at which transfers were genuine emergencies and which were recurring subsidies. Look at whether your own retirement savings are on track or whether they've been quietly hollowed out by the same transfers. And then, with the clarity that honesty brings, begin to adjust. Now, before you go, let me ask you for 3 things. First, if anything in this video landed on you tonight, subscribe to this channel. Walk with us. The next video in this series is going to be about the single most misunderstood asset in American life, the family home, and why both overinvesting and underinvesting in it destroys financial lives in ways most people never realize. You don't want to miss that one. Second, share this video with 5 people. 5 parents in their 40s and 50s. 5 friends whose grown children are still figuring out adulthood. You might be the reason, years from now, that a family somewhere stays whole instead of coming apart under the weight of unspoken financial dynamics. And third, leave me a comment, a real one. Tell me about a moment when you said yes to an adult child when you should have said, "Let me think about it." Tell me what you've learned. Tell me what you want me to cover next. Every deep video we make starts with someone asking the right question. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people counting on you. And remember, the help that feels most loving in the moment is almost never the help that serves them most over a lifetime. The quieter, harder, more disciplined love is the one they'll thank you for at 50, even if they can't understand it at 30.